We were initially brought in to do a proactive threat discovery engagement. This customer was very specifically in the manufacturing vertical. They weren't necessarily aware of anything specific going on in their environment, but they wanted us to come in and validate whether there was more going on that was potentially going unidentified or unseen. Fairly quickly, we identified that there was an advanced actor working within the customer's environment. The threat actor had been present there for over 2 years, and they had such an in-depth familiarity with their environment that as this manufacturer was releasing information from their dev and engineering teams and putting it up on a server to be QA'd, the actual adversary knew what the release cycle was and what those timelines were. And so they would actually just come back into the environment and specifically grab that information off of these staging servers for the QA team as it was released. So we go through the span of this investigation. We were luckily able to even find out how they initially got into the environment, what systems they had access to, and we started developing their remediation strategy. As they're preparing for an eradication event, they had a lot of initial activities that needed to occur before they could execute on the eradication by setting up additional solutions, implementing, servers that they were going to switch over to. Now, prior to them being ready for that, we see the threat actor come back into the environment, and we see them start trying to exfiltrate multiple gigs of somebody on the executive leadership team's email and various other data. And so at that point, the customer is not necessarily ready for remediation. Anything at that point would have been premature, and the threat actor would have continued to have access into the environment versus via the various persistence mechanisms that they had. And so we got creative in that instance. We ended up stopping the download, corrupting some of the data, which they thought was just a timeout. By the time they got it back and then had a chance to review it, that bought the customer enough time to expedite their remediation process. Once we transition into this remediation framework and eradication event, we can actually see the threat actor coming back and checking their various modes and entry vectors to get into the environment. We see them hitting their web shells where we had set up listeners, and we see them accessing the web shell and unable to actually communicate with it. So we see them start troubleshooting there. Would likely they're going to check their malware to see if their malware is checking in at the, to their C2. They're probably not seeing that there. So then we start seeing them accessing the VPN, where now there's multi-factor set up. And so now all of a sudden they're hit with a multi-factor page as opposed to just being able to leverage the customer's credentials. We actually see almost like an escalation of the sophistication of the troubleshooting, where it's almost like they are pushing it off to additional people to help them try to understand why they no longer have this access. They obviously knew that we had identified them within the environment and taken actions to remove them from the environment. And so what they did is they end up going over to the VPN and start leaving us messages via the usernames on the VPN service where they can't get in any longer. And they start saying things like, F you. So that's all publishing in the logs. And then we can read this progression of nasty things that they're saying to us and that they know that we've identified them. And then when ultimately we knew we were, fully successful, was we see them attempt to start, spear phishing specific individuals in the organization again. It was a unique progression of events from, coming in to initially perform a threat discovery, identifying somebody that's been there for, 2.5 years. And then when we actually start preparing for the remediation effort, they are exfilling data, but the customer's not ready for it. So having to go through the process of getting creative and do something to prevent them from being able to walk out with that data. And then ultimately, a successful remediation, and then ultimately seeing the spear phishing attempts to try to regain entry into the environment. So overall, just a pretty cool story, one that sticks out over the past 10 years of doing IR.